Welcome to Roots and Riches, the podcast. We believe that personal and financial well-being are uniquely yours and not just one size fits all. Here on this journey, we're all about empowering you to take control of your life, your finances, building wealth that resonates both outwardly and inwardly. I'm Janouska Jules, the dynamic force behind Roots and Riches, with 25 years of proven expertise across a spectrum of industries like community and economic development through my work in emergency management and disaster recovery, along with my work in financial services. In each episode, we'll dive into the ways social, economic, and other policies, mindsets impact our identities. We're here to explore the ways these factors can open doors or present challenges and how to navigate them and achieve your own version of success. Join us as we uncover stories, strategies, and insights that will help you forge a path to personal and financial riches, embracing the unique journey that is yours alone. So get ready to dig into roots, discover your riches, transform your future. Welcome to Roots and Riches. Let's build your legacy together. Today on Roots and Riches, we're thrilled to welcome Lindsey Vick, the founder and CEO of Sunflowers Healing and Wellness. With nearly 2 decades of experience in wellness industry, Lindsey is a certified hypnotherapist, Reiki master teacher, and expert in childbirth education. She manages 2 thriving brands, Blissful Lives, which focuses on personal empowerment through hypnotherapy and Reiki, and Blissful Bellies, a leading agency offering comprehensive childbirth education and doula services. As a passionate advocate for holistic well-being, Lindsey has also co-created a modern, inclusive approach to hypnobirthing that honors individual birthing experiences. Join us as Lindsey shares her journey and insights on integrating holistic wellness with practical strategies for personal and professional growth. So, here we are, Lindsey. Welcome to Roots and Riches. I want to thank you for coming on. I'm grateful that you've agreed to come on here, and I'd like to just get started by just simply asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you to decide to open a wellness center.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited by the purpose and goals of your podcast. I look forward to listening to future episodes myself. A little bit about me. So I live in Virginia, Alexandria, right outside of Washington, D.C. I grew up here. I've raised my family here. I've always been interested in alternative wellness modalities, energy healing, not so much hypnosis. I'll get to that in a minute. But, medicine wasn't the first thing that I turned to when I wasn't feeling well. I'll put it that way. When I was expecting my first baby, who is a college student now, so a little bit of time ago, I learned about pregnancy and childbirth and, all the different options that were available. I ended up not having the birth that I'd hoped to have. And in recovery from that and preparing for another birth, I realized I had to go a step deeper. I had to do some, perspective work on who I am and what works for me, and I found hypnosis. I remember the person who recommended it to me, and I remember thinking, I'm crunchy, but I'm not that crunchy. But I decided to go and check it out anyway, and it was a game changer. It was a complete life change for me. I was able to work through so many issues of pains and traumas that, we all carry with us. Mm-hmm. But that pain and trauma gets locked in our bodies and it limits us. It limits our growth. It limits our potential. It limits our happiness. Being able to release that opened up so many opportunities for me to grow as a person and as a professional. My business was born the same day as my daughter. During labor with her, I just realized this is what I want to do. I want to teach other people how to do this, how to reclaim their lives and their power, how to find that inner strength that allows them to do whatever they set their mind to do. I knew it was possible, but I also knew that it was going to be, a long road, a challenge. So I started the business. I got trained and certified as a hypnotherapist to start. my thought was I will just be focusing on the needs of pregnant people or folks in and around the childbearing year. But my very first client was a professional boxer who needed to maintain his weight class and was having a hard time doing that due to snacking.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood the assignment. Open the doors a little bit wider. I don't have to limit it just to perinatal health, which is how Blissful Lives and Blissful Bellies were born. I wanted to have a specialty in the perinatal years while also focusing on the needs of anybody who came in my door who was willing to make changes in their life using hypnosis. So Blissful Lives, we address, whatever the issue is. We work with people 16 and older. I did used to work with children, but I found that my preference and my specialty is working with older teenagers or adults.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the Blissful Belly side, where I spend quite a much more of my time, I'm a birth doula. I don't see clients for myself anymore, but I manage a team of about 15 birth and postpartum doulas. I train doulas. I certify doulas who've been trained elsewhere. I train childbirth educators, and it's some of the most rewarding work that I think I could do with my life. When I think back about where I thought my career would be going, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, this isn't what I expected, but it's what I was meant to do. I've always had a nurturing, part of me. I've always had a part that wanted to teach other people, that wanted to guide other people. And it turns out you can also make a living out of doing that. So that's my story. Yeah.
I mean, it's a great story. One of the things that I feel like when you were explaining it, you were brave, meaning a lot of us have a sense that we would like to step out of our comfort zone and start a new business and figure out what is our passion and how we did it. What was it? Did you look back and say, can I do this? Is it possible for me to do this? Or was it, fairly an easy choice for you? There was no looking back once you made that decision.
It became an easy choice. I'll put it that way. I previously had a career as a management consultant. I worked on affordable housing projects across the country, and I loved what I did. I did not like who I worked for. And so for several years, I was actually thinking about starting my own business, but in the affordable housing consulting industry. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point, Janouska, where I was sick going to work, right? Every morning I'd wake up and feel sick about going to work. And I remember talking to my husband one day. We'd been on vacation, and I hadn't had this sick feeling in my stomach the whole time we were away. We get back in town Sunday night, and it's Monday morning, and it's time to go to work, and there's that sick feeling, right? There wasn't anything physically wrong with me. It was anxiety. I did not want to be where I was anymore. And I didn't know how to get out of that. The job that I had, I loved the work that I did, and I felt locked in to the company that I worked for because of the flexibility and benefits that I had. Because I had been there for so long, because it was a startup when I began, I sort of had the leeway to set the schedule that I needed. And as a parent of a newborn, that was really important.
Yes.
Being able to, work when I needed to and bring my kid to work if I needed to. And I just worried that I wasn't going to find that anywhere else. So I had been looking into starting a business for a couple of years before I actually did. That was, my son was born in 2006. So that would have been 2006, 7, 8, and then 9 was the year that I just felt so sick all the time. 2010 is when my daughter was born, and I made the decision in labor. It was like, those light bulb moments you see in cartoons?
Yeah.
Literally a light bulb went off. Mm-hmm. And I named my business Sunflowers Healing and Wellness because I had my baby at home, and we were in the basement of my house, which had a big bay window. I remember having my eyes closed for most of labor, but every time I opened them, I just so happened to be facing that window. And it was a morning to afternoon labor, and so we had the sun that was just pouring in that bay window, and I felt like a sunflower. As the sunflower grows through the day, it's always turning its face to face the sun. And I just felt so drawn to that and inspired and empowered by it. When the light bulb went off, I knew I'm going to open this business. I'm going to call it Sunflowers, and that's the end. I know that some people, they just snap and decide to do it, and others, it's an evolution. I would say for me, it was a combination. It was an evolution of, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Both of my parents are entrepreneurs. So that's something that I grew up with.
Okay.
But I had a job
Mm-hmm.
with a salary and paid leave, right? So that mattered too. And I didn't want to just walk away from it. But that snap moment when I decided this is what I have to do, I never felt that pain in my stomach again. Never. It's never returned. I didn't leave my job. I'd had an extended maternity leave, and I put a lot of infrastructure in place for my business during that time, and I ended up going back to that job part-time.
Okay.
And that part-time schedule allowed me to work in my business and at my job that paid bills at the same time, so that I could grow my business to a point where it earned me enough money that it covered my expenses. The first year, I didn't make much, right? I made my expenses. I made my investment in training back, but I barely made enough to cover the rent and the supplies that I had to buy. So it was really nice to have that additional income. But after about a year, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Almost 2 years. After 2 years, I was on track to replace my income if I were able to do it full time. And the only way to get there was to leave that corporate job. So 2 years after starting the business, I transitioned from working 2 part-time jobs, which was really 1 part-time and a full-time, because when you're an entrepreneur, doesn't matter how much you invest in your business, you're working full-time. So I was able to step back and focus on my business at that time.
So even with you putting as much time as you weren't feeling the same stress that you would, or the anxiety that you were feeling just going to your corporate job?
I will say, yes, there was stress, and yes, there was anxiety, but it was different.
Okay.
I felt in control of it, right? When you work for someone else, my dog is hacking in the background.
That's okay.
When you work for someone else, there's a level of control that you give to them, a level of power that you give to them, and in exchange, they give you a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
They give you stability. When you work for yourself, you give that power and control to someone, but that someone is you.
Yeah.
Right? You give it to yourself. You give yourself the power and ability and control to be in charge of your own destiny. I was talking to my husband about this the other day, and it occurred to me that one of the things that I like about entrepreneurship is unlimited earning potential. When you work for a company, when you work for someone else, there's a salary. Maybe you're in sales and you could, have great sales month and make a lot of commission, but most folks are going to have a salary. And even in sales, there's only so much that you can sell, right? There's only so many days and so many products that can be sold in those days. So there's a limit on how much you can make in your income. As an entrepreneur, my income is directly tied to the effort that I put in, right?
Yeah.
And that's some luck, there have definitely been years I put a lot of effort in and made less than other years. But it's really unlimited. I have the potential to double, triple, quadruple the size of my business, which double, triple, quadruples the income. And that's actually something that I've worked on the past 2 years. I went from being a solo practitioner to having an agency. It was just me as a doula for over a decade. And a couple of years ago decided to bring some contractors on. So I added 3 contractors, and then I thought, I'm tired. I need to change things up. I need to not live on call anymore. And in order to replace that birth income, I decided to bring on, a bunch of independent contractors. And that vision allowed me to expand the limitations I had placed on my income.
Yeah.
Right? I'm on track this year to make 3 times what I made last year, simply by expanding into this agency model.
And getting the independent contractors. And you yourself have been the person who's been training them or certifying them?
Some of them come to me trained already. Okay. Some of them, have gone through my doula training. I'll say on track to triple the revenue of the business, not my take home, because I'm in this transition phase right now. So my take home actually went down, but that's okay because the agency revenue is going up, and eventually I'll get my footing in this new business model. So some of them have gone through my training. Most of them come to me already trained, but what I do offer to them is mentoring and coaching.
Okay.
A lot of times when you're new in an industry, especially one without standards, midwifery has standards, obstetric has standards, but doulas, there is no commonly accepted standard. So we kind of have to figure it out ourselves. We have training and there's a certification process and there's some, scope of practice, but there's nothing to enforce that. And the agency that I'm building, I want us to be elite doulas. I want us to practice with excellence in the top of our minds at all times. And so in order to do that, I think I've learned a lot about how to be an excellent doula over the years. In order to build a team of people who share that, I have to be able to teach. Right? I have to be able to share. I have to be able to mentor. And it turns out I love doing that too. So it's been a win-win for me, being able to count on sleeping in my bed all night and not getting a phone call at 3 a.m. and leaving and not knowing when I'll come back. I've traded that for being able to help shape the next generation of birth workers. There's a huge problem of burnout in our industry.
Okay.
And I figured out how to make it work. And there's some strategies and best practices that I've learned, sometimes the hard way, along the way. And I share those with the doulas on my team so that they can, if they choose to, have a sustainable career that also pays their bills.
So let's take a step back. So some of the members of the audience may not exactly know what's a doula or some of the services that you provide and what exactly that means. If you could explain that or define exactly what is a doula and what is the benefit of having a doula and who's the type of person who could potentially be your customer in general.
Yeah. So a doula is a non-clinical support person for the perinatal year. We support people through fertility. They're fertility doulas. There are prenatal doulas who support people just during pregnancy. There are labor doulas. There are postpartum doulas. There are bereavement doulas, and there are death doulas. My agency focuses on pregnancy, birth, and postpartum.
Okay.
So what we do is we act as like a concierge for our clients. We help them get information. We help them make decisions. We help them process things. We help them identify providers whose style and approach and reputation is in alignment with their goals. A lot of times people come to us and they have no idea what their goals are. So step one is, all right, let's figure out what your goals are. Now that we know what you want, let's see if we can find a provider who specializes in that. No need trying to fit the phrase, a square peg into a round hole. Yes, you have a peg in a hole, you have a doctor and a hospital, but is that the doctor and hospital you want? Or are you trying to force it to work for you? That doesn't work out very well for most people. Okay. So if we can find a provider and facility that already is set up to meet their goals, right away that person's going to have a better experience. And when I say better, I mean safer experience with better health outcomes. Okay. There's a quote, I forget the speaker, but the quote is something like, if a doula were a drug, it would be unethical to not prescribe it to a pregnant person.
Yeah.
Because the studies show that we reduce unnecessary interventions, When you have unnecessary interventions, you increase the risk and complication to that person's birth experience. So by reducing it, we're also reducing risk. We are improving health outcomes. People with a doula are far less likely to have an unneeded induction, to have a scheduled or even an unscheduled C-section. Unscheduled, most people call those emergency C-sections. And then we also support people on the back end of birth, on postpartum. People who have postpartum doulas often will benefit from being able to sleep through most of the night, while their counterparts are up 4 times a night with a crying baby. If you have an overnight postpartum doula, that doula is up overnight with the crying baby while you sleep.
Right.
She brings the baby to the parent for feeding if they're nursing, or she feeds with a bottle if they're bottle feeding. But it really helps them recover from birth, being able to have more quality sleep. Daytime postpartum doulas help parents be adjusted to being parents, right? They teach you how to live your life with a newborn. That might be routines that have to adjust in order to accommodate this new person in their lives. That might be learning how to soothe the baby, how to get them to go to sleep, how to feed them. It might be learning how to multitask, so wearing the baby while they take care of other things that need to be done in the house. So they do a lot of that coordination, but they also do a lot of those other things. They'll walk the dog, they'll do the dishes, they'll meal prep, they'll tidy up the kitchen or do the baby's laundry, which just help new parents live, just help.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think of my own experience when I had my son. My husband and I, we were on our own in Philly. We weren't near family, and we didn't have a doula. And then when I think back and think, it would have been wonderful for us to have a doula to just help us in that transition.
Yeah.
And, you know, and honestly, and I'm just going to speak for myself. I had a planned cesarean, and part of it was because I had fibroids, and I was told I had to have a cesarean to have my son. So I never considered anything like a doula because in my mind I was like, oh, I'm not having a natural birth, so a doula is not for me. But that's not the case, right? That
not at all. And I'll tell you, it's interesting you brought that specific example up, because my last client, as I said, I don't take many of my own clients anymore, but I do take scheduled C-sections. So my last client last week had a scheduled C-section for the same reason that you did. And she knew that on day one and still sought out the support of a doula. And I'm telling you, if you interviewed her, she would tell you the most important thing, or one of the most important things that she did during this pregnancy, was hire a doula. I walked her through all of the things that came up during her pregnancy. I was able to be a sounding board for decisions that she had to make where there was no clear right, wrong, yes, no answer. I helped her think through her choice of providers and her facility to make sure that she's in a place where she was going to feel safe. She had an issue with one of the doctors in that practice, so we had a strategy session on how to deal with that person if she ended up seeing them again for a prenatal appointment. I was able to be there with them at the hospital the day that their baby was born, which was fantastic because there were some complications, and they had a family member waiting in the lobby, in the waiting room, who was, understandably worried that this was taking so long. And so I was able to be there and explain to that person, this is what's happening, this is what we can do. I was able to help her get more information from the hospital so that her worries could be allayed as well. And then in this postpartum week, and it's been a week and a half, during that time, she's had some additional complications that I've been able to support her through. So yeah, there's a huge role. We did a whole childbirth class on how to have a baby by C-section.
Yeah.
It includes preparation and things to keep in mind during surgery, and ways to recover from that. And even with a planned C-section, there are still a lot of choices that you can have in the operating room. And most of the time, they're choices that your OB is not going to tell you about. Not because they're big, bad, mean people, but it's just not what they normally do, so they're not going to tell you about the 15 other ways that you could do this, but your doula will.
Yeah. When I remember my my son's birth. I was telling someone the other day about this. After he was operated, I was at a teaching hospital, so I remember him being born and my husband walking away with him, and I had to stay behind while they sewed me up, and I was there by myself, a little worried. And because it was a teaching hospital, they were teaching the other residencies, and they were pointing out all my scars and my fibroids, and I was like, this is not the best experience. So
that's fine.
yeah. So if I had that advocate or doula with me, I could have maybe understood like that could have been an option, and say, no, I don't want other physicians in there. I only want my own physician, etc. Not knowing the options. Back
and
then.
that's exactly right. That's something a doula could have helped walk you through in advance. This is a teaching hospital, so this is what their standard, their normal is, and you can say no.
Yeah.
I also had a C-section with my first baby. It wasn't planned, it was unscheduled. It was after 3 days of labor, and he just wasn't coming, so we had a C-section. And I didn't have a doula for that birth. I wish I had. I might have made a lot of decisions differently. But one of the things that certainly would have been different is my preferences for the early postpartum first hour or two, and things that I wanted to happen probably would have happened. I wanted to take my placenta home.
Okay.
They threw it out. Even though I asked for it as we're going into the OR, I said, remember, I want to take this home. They said, okay, yep, sure, we'll take care of it, don't worry. They're not paying attention to that. That's not top of their mind. So it got thrown out. I didn't want my baby to have certain medications, but I wasn't there to say that. So he got them.
Yeah.
And a doula would have been there to
advocate
and advocate for and with me. Yeah.
So I guess what leads to my next question is, since over the years since you've been in the industry, have you seen things change? Like people just being more open, how you even address and how you do your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say over the last, really since the beginning of COVID, many people prior to that, when I would have an initial consultation with them, part of the consultation was them asking, why do I need a doula? Right? And it almost felt like I had to sell the service. Since COVID, the people who are coming to me are coming because they've already done the research. They know they want a doula. They already know the benefit that a doula brings. They're just looking for the best fit.
Okay.
And
so they're already open-minded.
Whatever distinguishes you. There are very few doulas who are also hypnotherapists. So, and I am. I'm also an energy healer. So that was a big distinguisher for me. A lot of the people who came to work with me came because they wanted that option during birth of having someone there who had that skill set. Some of the doulas on my team have that skill set, but the distinguisher that we have now is we're an elite group of doulas. We provide excellent care. That is our standard. Right? For every client, that is our standard. Many of our doulas are also hypno-trained, so they have experience with hypnosis, even though they're not hypnotherapists. Some of them also have experience with energy healing. We also work cohesively as a team. So sometimes with longer labors, for instance, the primary doula might be communicating with the team saying, these are things we've done. What else can we try to help this mom get her baby out? Because, she's tired and worn out. And so that client knows that there's a team of people behind the scenes that are cheering them on and rooting for them. And it's commonly something that they will say was motivating to them during their labor, to know that there was a whole cheerleading squad, hoping that this baby would come and praying for it and cheering for it. Yeah.
So that's great. I guess for me, you're a Black female. Are there many Black females in your industry, or if there are, what attracts so many Black females in the industry? If they're not, what would you feel like could possibly grow Black women into the industry?
There are quite a lot, actually. There are many, many, many Black women who do this work. I would say many of them are heart-led. They are people who want to give to their community. I don't know if you know the history of midwifery in the United States, but it was brought here by enslaved African women.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
they were the people who were called to attend the births of other enslaved people, but also of white folks.
Yes.
And they carried the skill and they honed the skill and they brought it from the homeland to the United States through generations of people up until the early 1900s when obstetrics became a leading medical specialty.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And at that time, these Black women were stripped of their rights. Lots of laws were put into place that curtailed their ability to do their jobs. We call these people granny midwives. And they really set the stage for the Black women of today's generation who do this work from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I do this work from the heart, but it also pays my mortgage.
Yes.
I can't do free work.
Yes.
Lots of people do free work and they do super low budget work. I don't mean low budget in the service, but they don't charge a lot. They're low cost doulas. I do find that more in the Black community, that people are more heart-led and more likely to charge lower fees than in our peers who are white.
Mm-hmm.
I see them traditionally charging higher fees for the work that we do. But there's so many of us doing this work. And I think in the last 4 to 5 years, really since Serena Williams had her baby, her first baby, and she had that, I forget what her complication was, if it was preeclampsia or something. She had a complication that almost took her life.
It may have been blood clot or something like that, but
blood
I remember.
Clot, yeah, that sounds right. When that happened, and she called attention to this health disparity that impacts Black women at, I want to say, Black women die at 4 times the rate of white women.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Holding steady for income and education. So this is not a class issue. This is a race-based issue. That was a call to action for a lot of Black people.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people. I started seeing my clientele changing from, predominantly white clients to a nice mixture to today where 75% of our clients identify as BIPOC.
Yes.
And my entire agency is Black or Indigenous doulas.
Mm-hmm.
That was intention.
Yeah,
right?
intentional,
That. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing more and more agencies popping up that are run by Black women, for Black women. Their agency names are Afrocentric. You go to their website and it's very clear who they have been called to serve. And I love seeing that.
And it's making a real difference, right? You guys are making a real difference in terms of the mortality rate for women, and along with their children. Because I think I read a statistic also that among Black women in their infants, they're the ones who tend to be born premature the most.
Yep. Yep. They have higher rates of premature birth, and they also have, I don't know their statistic, but they also have a higher morbidity and mortality rate in the first year of life. Okay. Yeah. It's really scary. I recall one client probably 8 or 9 years ago who she came to my office for a consultation, and she sat down on my couch and she said, "Lindsey, I don't want to die when I have my baby." And that was the first time I'd had a client be that blunt about it.
Yeah.
I took that as a direct charge. This is my responsibility. And, we worked together very closely. I adored her and her husband, and they did all the things that were asked of them to have a healthy pregnancy experience, to have a healthy birth, including changing providers to someone that I personally recommended, that I had seen do quality work. And so while she's in labor, and her baby had a sudden and emergent complication, and they had to rush her out for an actual emergency C-section. Now, any C-section that's not scheduled is technically an emergency C-section. For my emergency C-section, we went to the hospital and waited for 3 hours.
Okay.
We drove there in our own car. That wasn't an emergency.
Yeah.
This person was wheeled out of the room and had a baby inside of 6 minutes.
Okay.
And on her way out of the room, she looked back at me and said, "Lindsey, don't let me die."
Had she had experiences within their own family, or did she just know?
Not necessarily. It was just, we know what the statistics are.
Okay.
Right? And that was her one fear. And now she's being rushed into this emergency procedure, literally to save her and her baby's life in the next few minutes. She ended up being just fine. Baby is just fine. She's gone on to have more children. They're all perfectly happy and healthy people. But that experience, that changed me. It changed me. And I started becoming more involved as an advocate, currently in training to be a chapter leader for the local International Cesarean Awareness Network, or ICAN, which is a international organization that helps people understand when C-sections are necessary, when they're convenient, what our rights are, what options are available to us, helps us make educated decisions. It was instrumental to me in planning my own VBAC, vaginal birth after C-section. So I got involved with that, and it was just, it just meant something different to me after that experience.
So that leads me to ask, what are some of the major challenges? It sounds like you really love the work, but what to you is a major challenge in just being in the industry that you're in and working with the people that you work with?
So I'll say two things. One is something that is evolving and changing, and that's the respect for what we do and the role that we provide. I think a lot of people had an image in their mind of a doula, wearing a long flowy skirt with some flowers in her hair, and she's barefoot, and she's, rubbing your shoulders and telling you don't go to the doctor. That's not what doulas do. Not at all. What we do is, it's not clinical, but it's just as professional as clinical.
Yes.
Right. So that's been a challenge, but as I said earlier, I feel like the tide is shifting. There is more respect for what we do. People are willing to invest in it because they see it as a critical part of their care team. The other part is, it's the lifestyle, right, of the doula herself. It's hard on us physically, it's hard on us emotionally, it's hard on our families. We're on call 24/7.
So essentially like a doctor. I
have not walked away from my phone.
Yes, yeah.
I have not walked away from my phone in like 15 years. We went on a cruise a few years ago, years before COVID. I didn't have service. I knew I wasn't going to have service, so I made sure that I had backup coverage for anybody who might possibly need their doula during the time that I was away. And that was the first time, and really the last time, that I have not had a phone attached to me.
Did you have someone backing you up when you were on that trip?
Yeah, somebody was backing me up. I know for a lot of people, they've experimented with, having some down screen time, I forget what you call it, going offline. Right? You've had a little time where you can put the phone away and walk away from it for a few days. Shut down a social media app on your phone. Turn your ringer off and ignore it. We can't do that. Right? We just can't. I use social media to keep abreast of what's happening at local hospitals because I'm in a lot of professional groups and doulas will share things. So I know when my client at XYZ hospital goes into labor tonight, I know that she's going to get diverted to another hospital because her hospital's full.
Okay.
So I can be on top of that. It's one way that we provide that excellent service. But there's a cost to us for that.
Yeah.
We're attached to that communication device. There's a lot of anxiety around being on call and missing a call, or which doesn't actually happen, but we worry about that. We worry about the things that we're going to miss in our own life. And one of the ways that I created some boundaries around my own personal life is I look at my calendar and I say, what is an I can't miss kind of event? I can't miss my kid's birthday. I can't miss my husband's birthday. I can't miss our anniversary. I can't miss my kids' ballet recital or their graduation ceremonies. And so these are dates that, as a doula, I have to know 6, 7, 8 months in advance.
Okay.
because they go in a contract.
Yeah.
And that client knows on that day, I will have a backup if I go into labor on that day.
Okay.
There's a lot of anxiety that comes with that, even though you know you've got solid backup. That's a paycheck you're not getting because you have to pay that backup.
Yeah.
And that's a relationship that you have nurtured and fostered, and now you don't get to see the conclusion, which is being present and supporting the labor and the birth. So we worry about that a lot. In early years of my career, I would say another challenge would be leaving for birth, not knowing when I'll get back, and being away for 2 nights, missing sleep for 2 nights in a row.
Yeah.
It takes a while to bounce back from that. So I put some boundaries in place around that as well. We provide up to 24 hours of in-person service, and then the client can move on to extended service, but that's with a new doula. And they pay more for that.
Yeah.
They pay a premium for that. And I learned that lesson the hard way when I was at a very long birth, brought another doula in to take over for me so I could go home and sleep. And the backup fee that I had to pay that doula is my entire paycheck.
For that time, yeah.
So I just worked for 40 hours for free. Never again.
Never again.
Never
and
again.
Thus, you've learned from those challenges. Your business has evolved. You've grown from that.
Yes.
On it. So.
And as an entrepreneur, I think it's really important, no matter what your industry is, to not be so prideful that you can't look back and say, what lessons have I learned? And how can I change policies going forward to better protect myself, to help continue growing my business in a way that is sustainable? I started this business when I was 30.
Yeah.
I'm not 30 anymore.
Yeah.
What worked for my life when I was 30 is not working for my life when I'm almost 50. It's not the same kind of life that I had as a younger person. And it's really important to be able to go back periodically and say what's working, what's not, what needs to change. I think as entrepreneurs, we can fall victim to I know it best because I built it. It's my baby. I birthed it. You did, but even your children grow. Right?
Yeah.
They grow and they learn.
Evolve.
And your business can grow and learn, and you can grow and learn with it. And the businesses that fail, sometimes one of the reasons that they fail is, the business owner was not receptive to the lessons that they were learning and couldn't turn those lessons around in a way that helped the business grow. It instead stimulated its growth.
And throughout that time, it sounds like your family had to be very supportive because of your need to be on call for everyone. So holidays may have been interrupted, etc. Maybe a school play missed or scenario. So sounds like you need a very supportive family also around.
Absolutely. My older child, if he ever had an issue, he never expressed it out loud. Mm-hmm. My younger child is a little more sensitive to mom's presence at things. And so if I had a due date around something that was important to her, I let her know what I was doing on my end to be able to be there and how much it meant to me to be able to be there. But I also set the stage that there's a possibility that I won't be able to be there. Now, that said, there were certainly times where it was a non-starter that I would miss the end of the year ballet recital.
Yeah.
And I know that date is coming, and I might not know what the date is when I signed a contract 5 months earlier, but I can put in the contract, this event will be happening around this time, and the exact date is to be determined, and you will have a backup on that day.
Which is totally understandable because when I even think about my own, the gynecologist or obstetrician, my son came a few weeks earlier, even though I was scheduled for a C-section, he came a few weeks earlier. So he was not actually the one who delivered my son. So his backup did because it did. So it just makes sense even with you, that would make sense to do that.
Some people don't understand that. And, they don't want a doula who has a limit on 24 hours of in-person service. They don't want a doula who doesn't do office hours and prenatal appointments after 7 p.m. or on weekends. That's another way that I preserve family time. I don't do evening appointments. Does your OB see you at 9 p.m.? Well, I'm not either.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's my family time. And at this age, that's my bedtime.
Yeah. Totally get it.
Yes, and that's okay, because you know what? There is a doula who will work on the weekends to see you, or who will come to your house at 9 p.m. for a prenatal appointment. You will find that person. It just doesn't have to be me.
Okay.
And I'm not too prideful to feel like I need to work with every client. Every client is not my client, and that's okay. And that's something I try to teach the doulas on my team too. We don't have 100% close rate on folks that we interview with, because we shouldn't.
Yeah. Because they might not be the right fit for you, and vice versa, you might not be the right fit for them.
That's right. That's right.
So one of the last questions I do want to ask you is, for those who are considering your services, in terms of cost, because I heard you say earlier that some white doulas, for example, may charge a lot more for their white counterparts, and some just do it for heartfelt. With that leads to the question, is this accessible for people of all incomes? You know, because sometimes people will hear, you know, doula or midwifery and be like, that's not for me. I don't have the money for that. And then don't even consider it.
Right. Midwifery care is a little different in that, you know, midwives have to be licensed in most states. Licensure is an incredibly expensive process, and they have to carry malpractice insurance, many of them, which is also incredibly expensive. So it's unlikely, it's possible, but it's unlikely that you will find a low-cost midwife. For doulas, it's very different, because, as I said earlier, there's no national standards for doula services. If you wanted to wake up tomorrow and call yourself a doula, there's nothing stopping you, right? And if you want to wake up tomorrow and say, I'm a doula, I'm going to advertise, and I'm not going to charge much because I didn't have any upfront starting costs, you could do that. And a lot of people do. I think most people get trained as a doula. I know a handful of doulas who didn't necessarily have formal training, but it's ancestral work for them.
Yeah.
Their mother did this work, their aunt did this work, their grandmother did this work. They don't need training. This is their life. This is what they were raised in. And so there are people in all different categories of cost. It is possible to find a free doula. Some doulas volunteer their time. It's something I would like to do at some point when my business is profitable enough that I can take a pro bono client here and there. I'd love to be able to do that. I know some doulas who do. I'd love to be able to offer a sliding scale, and many doulas do that as well. Sometimes there's a process that the person would go through to demonstrate financial need, and other times it's based on trust. There's I forget the name of it now, but this would be applicable outside of the birth world as well. It's a rubric for sliding scales. And it asks you some questions. If you have, it tries to kind of categorize your disposable income. Can you afford to do this type of thing? Can you afford to do that type of thing? If so, this is how much you should plan on paying. And there's a name for this rubric, and I just don't remember it right now. But I really like that idea. It leaves some power in the client to make an informed decision, but it also gives them an opportunity to make a fair decision. You know,
I thought I saw that doula services at time can be covered by either HSA or FSA.
Yes.
Funds.
Yeah. So doulas have to they have to apply with whatever money processing company that they use. So I use Square. So I had to apply through Square to be able to accept that form of payment. So I can accept that. Some doulas are in network with certain insurance providers. There are at least a handful of private company insurance providers that will cover doula fees. There are state insurance agencies that will cover doula fees. In the District of Columbia, for instance, you can get your doula fees covered through, not a state, but it's through state insurance. Same in Virginia. Military folks can get insurance covering doula services as well through TRICARE. Unfortunately, for a lot of those state-based and TRICARE-based insurance, the reimbursement rate for the doula is laughably low. It is not an income model that is a living wage. You know, the doula will pay her child care the entire amount of what she just earned through the state insurance. So for some people, that might be their heart-based work, right? And they might have their income-based work sourced through something else. But they do take these state insurance clients, and they're able to do that because they have income that's offset by other clients paying different fees. There's some healthcare benefits that we're seeing lately. Progeny is one. Carrot is another one, like Carrot the vegetable. And these are benefit programs offered through like HR, through your benefits manager at work. And they reimburse for coverage for doulas and for midwives. Carrot covers midwives as well as IVF treatment. So this is becoming more popular, and I would recommend for any listener who wants to start a family, do the legwork first. If your employer doesn't offer one of these health benefits, lobby for them to do so. There's so many people who are benefiting from doula support now because their employer's benefit is paying for it, who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford the doula that they wanted to work with.
Okay. That leads me to ask one more question, and it may or may not affect you, but with the Supreme Court's ruling a few years ago around abortion, and it has affected healthcare providers throughout the United States. I happen to live in Texas, where abortion is essentially outlawed. Do you feel like that has affected your work in any way?
Not where I live. I live in a purple state in Virginia. To my knowledge, abortion is legal here. I'm not certain about that, actually. I know it's legal up to a certain point, and it might be like 26 weeks. But frankly, at 26 weeks, you're not having an abortion, you're having a birth. You might be birthing a stillborn baby, or a baby that you know is not going to survive because of a health condition, and nothing to do with wanting to abort the baby. And that's the case in a lot of places, but where we live, DC, Maryland, very blue areas, we're not seeing the kind of restrictions that we're seeing in Idaho, for instance, or in Texas, or Mississippi and Alabama. I have a contact in Idaho who is no longer working as a doula because the only hospital in her county that offered maternity closed because they didn't have any doctors to work in it.
Because it was too risky for them.
Too risky for them.
So the women who could be benefiting from her services are now not benefiting not only from the doctor's services, but even the doula services.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's really a tragedy. We hear the stories here in our area. We don't see them firsthand because we're not living in those places, but we hear the stories. I have colleagues who live in those places. I hear their stories. It's really, it's shameful. It's shameful that it's 2024 and this is the world that some women in the United States live in.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but hopefully your colleagues who are living in states like mine and others are able to figure out how to provide some sort of support for those women who are giving birth, and it's not too much of a challenge for them as they try to service their needs on that. So. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to see, learn a little bit more about how the doulas in some of those areas are advocating for change. I know quite a few people are working at the grassroots level to elect officials who will make those changes. But in some of those states that are deeply, deeply red, it's really difficult to do that absent, a state ballot initiative. which I think is the way to do it. I think that's what needs to happen.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I agree with that. So we are coming to the end, and so I want to again thank you. This has been a great conversation, but before we sign off, I just wanted to ask you what's up next. Is there anything you want our audience to know about what's up next, how to reach you, where they can find you?
Sure. So my website is sunflowers with an S on the end, sunflowerswellness.com. I'm sure you'll share that when you publish the podcast. But folks can reach out to me via email or the phone number that's on the website. There's a contact us form on the website that comes directly to me. I'd love to hear from you if you're interested in becoming a doula and want to learn more about the training that I offer. If you're interested in becoming a childbirth educator, I do trainings on that twice a year. Every year, September, March is our training schedule. And if you happen to be in the DC area and want to support our pregnant families here, reach out and I'd be happy to help you get started.
Okay. Well, it was a joy. Thank you, Lindsey. I appreciate it. And everyone, I want to thank you for joining my community on our very first podcast. This is Janouska Jules again on Roots and Riches, and take care and don't forget to like and subscribe.